My name is Beverly Porter. I'm 32 years old. The chandelier above my parents' dining room glittered like an unblinking eye, throwing sharp shadows across the polished mahogany table. It felt less like a family dinner and more like a tribunal. Every detail had been curated to remind me of where I stood, or rather, where I didn't stand in this family. Mother's invitation had arrived yesterday, written in her flawless cursive. Family emergency meeting, she'd called it, as though my existence were a crisis. The paper smelled faintly of her lavender stationery, the same one she used when writing apology notes to the country club whenever father lost his temper at the staff. Beverly, darling. My mother's voice reached me as soon as I entered. The way she said my name carried the softness of silk wrapped around steel. Couldn't you have chosen something more presentable? I glanced down at my white shirt and plain black pants. Crisp, clean, deliberate. My wardrobe didn't scream wealth, but it whispered discipline. Ironically, the outfit cost more than half of what she wore on her best days, but that wasn't the point. To them, appearances were armor. To me, they were chains I'd discarded years ago. Before I could reply, the sharp clicking of heels announced Victoria's arrival. My older sister swept in like a parade queen, her Hermes bag dangling from her manicured hand, her smile smug and rehearsed. CFO of Father's Empire, the Golden Child. She sat opposite me, deliberately, meeting my gaze with a smirk. Still running that little Etsy shop, she asked, as though the words themselves left a sour taste. Selling crafts to bored housewives. I raised my glass of water, letting the silence between us stretch. I'd mastered silence years ago. It unnerved them more than anger. If she only knew about the sealed contracts waiting in my real office, or the Forbes editorial meeting from this morning. If she only knew that in less than 2 hours, her position as family star would start to crumble. Let's get started. Father's baritone cut across the tension. He took his place at the head of the table, his authority heavy in the air. 30 years as CEO had given him a presence that once made me shrink. Not anymore. We're here, he began, because we're concerned about Beverly's situation. There it was again. Situation. As though my independence were an illness. Mother folded her hands primly. We've been patient, dear, but this phase, it's beginning to affect our reputation. The neighbors, the country club board, they ask questions. I thought of the acquisition papers waiting in my penthouse office documents that would soon ripple through every financial market in the country. But here at this table, I was still the family disappointment. Victoria flipped her hair, her bracelets catching the light. We were hoping you'd come to your senses eventually. A respectable job. Maybe even join the family firm. But clearly, she gestured at me. That hasn't happened. My phone buzzed in my lap. One glance at the screen and my chest tightened, not with fear, but with exhilaration. A message from Marcus. Everything's set. Press embargo lifts at 6 p.m. I checked my watch, 1 hour 57 minutes. Father leaned forward, lowering his voice into the tone he reserved for difficult clients. We've found you a position. Junior analyst. Porter Financial. You'll start Monday. I studied his face carefully. Did he realize how absurd this was? Did he see the irony in offering me crumbs when I had baked an entire feast? Actually, I said evenly, did you know Forbes is releasing their most powerful women list today? Victoria gave a tinkling laugh. Of course. I've been shortlisted 3 years running. She hadn't. We all knew it. Not that it matters to you, she continued sweetly. It's hardly relevant to craft hobbies. The urge to laugh rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Patience had been my greatest weapon. They'd never believed silence could be dangerous. My mother's eyes flicked to me, cautious. What do you tell people you do, dear? Financial technology solutions, I replied simply. Shopify websites, Victoria corrected with a smirk. Another buzz from Marcus. Outlets are prepped. Everything goes live at 6. I placed my phone face down on the table and exhaled slowly. Almost time. The point is, Father pressed, you're 32. Time to join the real world. The real world. My lips curled faintly. My company's valuation alone could buy and sell his so-called real world 3 times over. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Victoria leaned in, nails tapping the table. Success, Beverly, is measured in numbers, not Instagram likes. My gaze drifted to the chandelier, its glass pendants trembling from the faint draft. Something about the shimmer reminded me of dominoes. Soon the first would fall, and the rest, Porter Financial included, would topple in line. Then it happened, a chorus of phones buzzing simultaneously, breaking news alerts lighting up every screen. My parents, Victoria. They all froze reading. Major financial technology acquisition to be announced at 6 p.m. Father read aloud. Sources say largest deal in industry history. I sipped my water slowly, savoring the moment. How's Porter Financial's tech division performing these days? I asked softly. Father frowned. We're holding steady. Though this announcement might affect market positioning. Victoria's eyes narrowed. And how would you know that? I set my glass down deliberately, the sound sharp against the silence. I should head back to the office. Busy evening ahead. Sit down. Father's voice cracked like a whip. We're not finished discussing your future. On the contrary, I murmured, rising from my seat. The future is about to discuss itself. I left them in the heavy silence of that dining room, my footsteps echoing like a countdown clock. 1 hour and 53 minutes to go. The hallway outside the dining room felt colder than usual, though maybe that was just my pulse slowing after their little performance. I wasn't leaving yet, not physically. Instead, I paused by the living room window, listening as their voices filtered through. Years of being ignored had sharpened my ability to hear every whisper they thought I'd missed. She's impossible, Victoria hissed, voice tight. This defiance, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing, my father echoed. It's reckless. A porter doesn't squander opportunity to chase hobbies. Hobbies. The word stung, but I held on to it. They couldn't fathom the scale of what I'd built precisely because they couldn't see beyond their own narrow definitions of power. I pushed the door back open and returned to my seat without invitation. Their heads turned surprised. You didn't think I'd just leave before dessert, did you? I smiled faintly. Victoria rolled her eyes. You're acting smug, Beverly. You have no idea how real business works. Oh, I have some idea. My voice was calm, almost pleasant, but inside my chest, a storm swirled. 1 hour and 35 minutes. Mother reached across the table, her rings glinting in the light. Darling, no one's against you. We only want what's best, a proper path, respectability, security. Security, I repeated. That's an interesting word. My fingers drummed the table once, twice. Tell me how secure do you feel about Porter Financial's next quarter earnings? Father's gaze snapped up. Excuse me. Victoria laughed sharp as glass. See? She reads a couple of blogs, and suddenly she's Nostradamus. I leaned back, allowing the silence to stretch again. It was delicious watching them underestimate me again and again. Every dismissal was fuel, every insult a nail in the coffin of their certainty. Father cleared his throat. We've arranged for you to start Monday. Junior analyst under Victoria's division. Learn discipline, gain experience. Then perhaps, if you prove capable, we'll consider promotion. Promotion, Victoria added quickly, wouldn't be guaranteed, of course. Their faces were so certain, so self-satisfied, as if they were offering me a lifeline rather than an anchor. I wondered briefly how they'd look in 1 hour and 29 minutes when that lifeline turned into a noose around their company's neck. Actually, I said softly, I already have a board meeting tomorrow. The words hung in the air like smoke. Father frowned. What board? You'll find out soon enough. Victoria scoffed. Cryptic riddles don't change reality. You're 32, Beverly. You're wasting your prime years. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. All outlets confirmed. Countdown steady. 1H27. I let the buzz vibrate against the wood of the table. It was like a secret metronome ticking toward revelation. The chandelier's reflection shimmered in my water glass. For a moment, I saw not prisms of light, but shattered glass, as though the ceiling itself was about to collapse. Maybe in a way it was. Mother tried once more, voice gentler now. When people ask about you, we've been vague. It's easier than explaining. Well, whatever this is. What do you tell them, I asked? That you're freelancing, she admitted carefully. I laughed low and soft, the kind of laugh that made them stiffen though they didn't understand why. Freelancing, I echoed. Interesting. Then it happened. The second round of alerts. All 4 of our phones buzzed simultaneously. Father's hand darted to his pocket, Victoria's eyes widening as she read. Breaking news, she muttered, voice sharp. A fintech acquisition. $8.2 billion. Her eyes flew to me, suspicion sparking. You know something about this. I finished my water in one slow swallow, set the glass down, and smiled. You'll see soon. Father slammed his fist against the table, rattling the silverware. Enough games. This family is not a circus for your theatrics. I met his gaze steadily. Then maybe stop treating me like the clown. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. The words had landed heavier than I expected. Even Mother's hands stilled over her napkin. Finally, Father exhaled through his nose the way he did when closing a deal he didn't like. Go on then, he said coldly. Leave. But remember, when reality comes crashing down, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. I stood smoothing my shirt, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. That's fair, I said, because in about 1 hour and 20 minutes, reality is going to come crashing down, just not on me. Their faces froze, trying to decipher the meaning, but I didn't wait to clarify. I walked out, leaving their confusion behind like smoke dissipating in the air. As I stepped outside into the cool evening, my phone buzzed once more. Marcus again. Elevator will be ready. Reporters already gathering. You sure you don't want to warn them? I typed back with steady fingers. They've had years to see me. They chose not to. Tonight the world won't give them that choice. 1 hour, 19 minutes. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed to the top floor of Genesis Tower. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, plain white shirt, black pants, hair tied back neatly. To anyone else, I could have been mistaken for an assistant. The irony made me smile. Marcus stood beside me, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. His calmness had always been my anchor. They're all here, he said, his voice low but electric with anticipation. Reporters, analysts, even 2 rival CEOs, trying to sneak in under press badges. Tonight changes everything. My phone buzzed again, another barrage of messages from my family. From Dad. Something big is happening in fintech. Call me immediately. From Mom. Darling, are you home? Please don't do anything rash. From Victoria. If this is what I think it is, you're finished. I slipped the phone into my pocket without replying. They'd learn the truth soon enough. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime revealing a lobby alive with flashbulbs. The hum of whispered speculation, the metallic scent of microphones and nerves. The Genesis Financial Technologies logo gleamed behind the podium like a crown. Cameras swung towards me instantly. A ripple moved through the crowd, anticipation sharpening like static in the air. Marcus pressed a slim folder into my hand. The press release, just in case. I didn't even glance at it. I'd written every word in my head years ago. The moment I stepped forward, silence spread across the room. All eyes tracked me, searching, measuring. Somewhere across the city, my family was no doubt glued to Victoria's phone watching the live stream. The thought steadied me. I placed the folder on the podium and lifted my chin. Good evening. My voice rang clear, steadier than I felt inside. My name is Beverly Porter, CEO of Genesis Financial Technologies. The silence fractured into chaos. Camera flashes burst like fireworks. Reporters surged forward, voices, overlapping questions tumbling over one another. But I wasn't done. Tonight, I am proud to announce that Genesis Financial has completed an acquisition valued at $8.2 billion, the largest in fintech history. Alongside this, we are unveiling our AI-driven banking platform designed to redefine the way financial institutions serve their clients. I paused deliberately, letting the weight of it settle. Across the sea of flashing lights, I could almost hear Victoria's gasp, my father's disbelief, my mother's hurried attempt to mask her humiliation. This isn't just an acquisition, I continued. It's a revolution. The future of finance belongs to those who innovate, not to those who cling to outdated systems. Reporters shouted questions about the AI, about competitors, about me. I held up a hand, quieting them. For years, I was underestimated, dismissed, labeled as unfocused, unserious, incapable of handling the so-called real world. My gaze swept the room, daring any one of them to look away. Tonight, I stand before you as proof that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, can rewrite the story entirely. The applause that broke out wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Not everyone clapped, of course. The rivals in the room sat stiff, their expressions carved from stone. But it didn't matter. The story was already writing itself across headlines. When I stepped away from the podium, Marcus was waiting in the wings, his eyes lit with awe. You just detonated a bomb in the financial world. I exhaled tension, unspooling from my chest. Good. It was getting too quiet. We slipped through his back exit into the private corridor leading to my office suite. Already my phone was vibrating nonstop. I pulled it out, dozens of missed calls, hundreds of texts. From Dad. What have you done? This is impossible. Call me immediately. From Mom. Darling, we're all so proud. Why didn't you tell us sooner? The country club board will be thrilled. From Victoria. You manipulative little... How long have you been planning this? This is sabotage. Sabotage. That one made me smile. The penthouse office was bathed in the golden glow of the city lights. I crossed the room to the floor-to-ceiling windows staring out at the skyline. Genesis Tower stood taller than Porter Financial's glass fortress on the other side of downtown. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. "They have no idea, do they?" Marcus asked quietly, setting down 2 espressos. "No," I murmured, "but they're about to." My phone buzzed again. A private line. "Caller ID Elizabeth Chin, Editor-in-Chief Forbes." I answered. Beverly Elizabeth said warmly, "The cover story's ready for tomorrow." Title: The Silent Revolution. How Beverly Porter Built a Financial Empire While Her Family Looked Away. Any last words you'd like me to add? I thought of the dining table, the chandelier. Victoria's smirk, my father's condescension. My mother's delicate disappointment. "Yes," I said softly. "Success doesn't need permission. It only needs patience." When I hung up, the office was silent again, except for the faint hum of the city below. One war was over, another was about to begin. The press conference ended, but the storm had only just begun. By the time I returned to my office, my phone was a battlefield. Notifications stacked one over another, news alerts, congratulatory emails, LinkedIn requests from people who once ignored me, and of course, the relentless flood of family messages. "Beverly." Marcus's voice was calm, but his eyes gleamed with something close to exhilaration. "Porter Financial's stock just plummeted, down 20% in the first hours. He turned his laptop toward me. "Up 40. Analysts are calling this the death knell of legacy banking." I took the espresso he handed me, savoring the bitter taste. Victory always tasted like coffee to me, dark, sharp, waking. "Your family's blowing up the lobby line," he added. "Your father's tried 3 times to get past security. Your sister threatened to call the police if we didn't let her up." I raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" She didn't specify. Marcus smirked. She was shouting too much. I laughed softly. The image of Victoria, red-faced and sputtering, railing at guards who didn't even recognize her name, that alone almost made the years of condescension worth it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the city skyline stretch before me. Glass towers, steel skeletons, roads glowing with headlights. I owned more of it than they realized. More than anyone realized. My phone buzzed again. Dad, predictably. I didn't answer. But then the intercom crackled. "Miss Porter," my assistant's voice came through, hesitant. "Your father is here, and he's brought your grandfather." That made me pause. Alexander Porter Sr., the man who had founded Porter Financial before passing it to his son. The man whose voice still carried weight in the family, even if age had thinned his frame. He had once taught me how to spot market patterns over breakfast cereal before he too was swept into the tide of praise that always carried Victoria. "Send them up," I said finally. Marcus shot me a look, half question, half warning. But I only nodded. It's time. The door opened a few minutes later. Dad entered first. His usual commanding presence diminished, his shoulders sagging as though gravity had finally found him. Behind him, Grandpa walked with surprising steadiness, his cane tapping softly against the marble floor. "The quiet one," Grandpa said, his eyes sweeping the office, the view, the Genesis logo etched in steel on the glass wall. "Always watching. Always learning. I wondered when you'd show them." Dad's head snapped around. "You knew." "Of course I knew." Grandpa lowered himself into a chair, his gaze never leaving me. "I knew when she corrected my projections at 12 years old. She saw the 2008 crash before it happened. You were too busy praising Victoria's new haircut to notice." A flicker of shame crossed Dad's face, though he quickly masked it. He turned back to me, voice brittle. "Why? Why the deception? Why not come to us?" "Deception," I echoed, standing slowly. "I filed every form, built every structure in plain sight. You just never looked. You saw what you wanted to see, a daughter dabbling in crafts, not a CEO constructing an empire." His face paled. "Your little online business." M was a subsidiary I finished for him. A cover. One you were happy to dismiss. It kept you from asking questions. Grandpa chuckled, shaking his head. "And now you own the country club they wouldn't let you join." Dad's eyes snapped wide. "What?" "Genesis acquired it last month," I confirmed smoothly. "Along with most of the gated community you pride yourselves on, you'd be amazed what you can buy when no one takes you seriously enough to check the buyer's identity." Dad sank into the chair opposite me, his expression a mix of disbelief and something dangerously close to fear. "This will destroy Porter Financial," he whispered. "No." I slid a leather folder across the desk toward him. "This will save it if you're smart enough to take the offer." His trembling fingers opened the folder. Inside lay the merger proposal I'd prepared weeks ago. A merger, he breathed. Porter Financial becomes part of Genesis, I said. You keep the name, some autonomy, the legacy. But ultimately, you join the future instead of fighting it. And if we refuse? I turned my screen toward him, displaying the AI platform demo. The numbers pulsed on the graphs like a heartbeat. Then you compete against technology that's already 4 times your worth, with banks already lining up to defect. Compete against me, against the future itself. Dad's mouth worked, but no words came. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes sharp with quiet pride. You've orchestrated quite a checkmate, my dear. I learned from the best, I said softly. You always told me the quiet ones are the most dangerous. They listen while everyone else talks. Marcus reappeared with more market updates. Genesis stock is up another 15% in after-hours trading. Porter's been downgraded by 3 major analysts. Dad's face drained of color. You have until morning, I told him calmly. After that, the terms become less generous. He stood slowly, folder still in his hands. At the door, he paused, his voice low. That junior analyst position was beneath me 4 years ago. I finished for him, just like it's beneath me now. The difference is, today, you finally understand why. He left with Grandpa, the door clicking shut behind them. For a long moment, I stood in the silence, watching my reflection in the window. Same plain white shirt, same quiet presence. But the view behind me was different now, a skyline I owned, a future I had built in secret. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's letting them realize they never knew you at all. The city barely slept that night. I didn't either. From my office window, the skyline flickered with restless energy. Every financial channel replayed my press conference on loop, dissecting every word, every micro-expression, every number. Genesis had gone from quiet newcomer to industry overlord overnight. But in the quiet hours, my thoughts kept circling back to my family. My father, with his trembling hands, my mother's voice laced with brittle politeness, Victoria's eyes burning with wounded pride. They weren't just rivals now, they were prey. At dawn, Marcus handed me a stack of reports. Porter Financial bled another 10% overnight. By morning, they'll be desperate. I set the papers down untouched. Desperation makes people dangerous. He studied me for a moment. And your sister? Victoria will fight harder than the board itself, I said. She's built her entire identity on being untouchable. Watching it collapse will be unbearable for her, for Dad, for all of them. As if summoned, my phone lit up with Victoria's name. I let it ring out. Seconds later, a text appeared. You think this makes you powerful? You're nothing without this family. You'll regret humiliating us. I stared at the words, then locked the screen. Threats from Victoria had always been noise. Now they were static against the signal of my empire. By mid-morning, the Porter Financial boardroom was chaos. I wasn't there physically, but I didn't need to be. I had full access to their security feed, a little insurance policy I'd set up when Genesis quietly purchased the building's security contract. On my screen, directors shouted over one another, papers strewn across the glossy table. My father sat rigid at the head, his jaw tight. And at the opposite end, Victoria standing gesturing wildly, her voice raised to a pitch that bordered on shrill. This is sabotage, she barked, stabbing her finger toward a graph that showed their plummeting stock. She's our sister, not some outsider. We can't let her win. Her words carried desperation, not authority. The directors avoided her eyes. For the first time, Victoria wasn't the golden heir. She was just noise in the middle of a firestorm. Enough, my father's voice cut across the room, strained. The numbers don't lie. We have to consider her proposal. The camera caught Victoria's face, shocked, betrayed. You can't mean that. Dad, you can't. I can, and I do, he snapped. The weight of survival pressed every syllable. If we don't merge, we won't last the quarter. I leaned back in my chair, watching, listening, savoring. Grandpa was right. I had orchestrated a checkmate. They could bluster, threaten, resist. But the board was already leaning toward me, pulled by the gravity of Genesis's success. That evening, my father came to me again. Alone this time. He looked older, tired, in a way power had never allowed before. You've left us no choice, he admitted quietly. There's always a choice, I corrected. Just not one you'll like. He flinched at my words, but nodded. The board will vote tomorrow morning. Good. I slid another folder across the desk. In the meantime, read this. He opened it, eyes scanning the pages. This strips Victoria of her CFO title. Yes, I said evenly. She'll be offered a junior role. She can choose to take it or leave with nothing. That's her choice. His mouth opened, closed again. He was swallowing pride, choking on it. She won't accept this. She doesn't need to. The board will. He looked at me for a long moment. You're colder than I imagined. Not cold, I said softly. Just done playing their game. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city below the heartbeat of an empire that now belonged to me. At the door, he hesitated. Your mother. She keeps asking why you never told us, why you hid all this. I met his gaze steadily, because you never listened when I spoke. Hiding wasn't strategy, it was survival. He left without answering. When the office was silent again, Marcus asked quietly, Does it feel like victory yet? I turned back to the window. The city lights glowed like embers waiting for dawn to stoke them into fire. Not yet, I said. Victory comes tomorrow when they sign away everything they once thought was theirs. I pressed my hand against the glass, the cool surface grounding me. Tomorrow the board would make its choice. Tomorrow Victoria's crown would shatter. And tomorrow the quiet one would claim the throne. The morning broke cold and bright, though the sun did little to warm the mood in Porter Financial's tower. I didn't need to be there in person. My screens showed me everything, the boardroom filled with polished suits, their faces pale under the weight of crumbling stock numbers. At the far end of the table, Victoria stood tall, arms crossed, jaw set. She was immaculate as always. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect rage. She reminded me of a porcelain doll, beautiful and fragile one crack away from shattering. This is a hostile takeover, she snapped, her voice pitched high with indignation. We can't just surrender everything to her, to Beverly. Her words bounced against the sterile walls. The directors shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the screens, displaying their plummeting numbers. One finally spoke, Victoria. Our stock is down 45% in 2 days. 3 of our biggest clients already signed over to Genesis. If we don't act, we won't exist by quarter's end. Victoria slammed her hands on the table. We are porters. We don't kneel. My father's voice cut through, weary but sharp. Sometimes kneeling is survival. For the first time, Victoria faltered. Her eyes widened, searching his face for loyalty, for validation. But his expression was hollow, carved from defeat. I leaned forward in my chair, watching through the live feed. My coffee steamed in my hand. This was it, the moment years in the making. The board chairman rose, papers trembling slightly in his hand. We've reviewed Genesis's proposal. It is harsh, but it ensures survival. I call for a vote. One by one, hands lifted, some hesitant, some firm. Yes, yes, yes. Victoria's lips moved furiously, though the feed carried no sound. She was pleading, bargaining, threatening, all in vain. The hands kept rising. Finally, the chairman spoke. The motion passes. Porter Financial accepts Genesis's merger on the terms provided. My office filled with silence, broken only by Marcus's quiet intake of breath. They caved, he murmured. Completely. On the screen, Victoria slumped back into her chair, eyes wide with disbelief. She looked like a general who had marched her army into battle only to realize they'd deserted her mid-charge. My father didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. He just stared at the table. The man who had once ruled boardrooms now reduced to a relic at his own table. I whispered into the stillness of my office checkmate. Marcus exhaled slowly, almost reverently. What do you want me to do with her? Victoria, I asked, sipping my coffee. Offer her the junior role, the same one they once shoved in my face. Let her decide if she's willing to start over or if she prefers exile. He nodded, already sending the documents. Across the feed, I saw the directors rising, shaking hands stiffly, their relief palpable. Survival meant surrender, but surrender was better than extinction. Victoria, though, remained frozen. Her lips moved again, and though I couldn't hear her words, I knew them. This isn't fair. This isn't over. I closed the feed. Watching her break was almost too intimate, like staring at a mirror of who I could have been if I hadn't chosen silence, patience, power. Prepare the integration team, I told Marcus. Porter Financial belongs to Genesis now. The words felt like a final nail sealing a coffin. Not just theirs, but the version of me they'd buried years ago. That night, when the announcement went public, the financial world erupted. Headlines screamed, Genesis devours, Porter Financial. Youngest female CEO forces legacy, giant into merger. The silent revolution continues. My phone lit with new calls, this time from rival CEOs, from international banks, from ministers asking for meetings. My family's names never appeared in those notifications. And in the quiet of my office, overlooking a city that now felt firmly mine, I framed the moment in my mind, the board's defeated faces, Victoria's unraveling. Humiliation wasn't my goal, but it was the inevitable consequence of their arrogance. Sometimes the crown doesn't fall, it's ripped away. The merger was official within a week. Genesis banners were draped across Porter Financial's once proud tower. The old name remained etched in stone above the entrance, but everyone knew which company now held the keys. Inside, the air was different. The once confident employees whispered in corridors, glancing nervously as Genesis teams arrived with laptops and clean-cut efficiency. Porter staff, who had once scoffed at me as the CEO's wayward daughter, now lowered their voices when I passed eyes filled with something uncomfortably close to awe. I should have felt only triumph. Instead, I felt weight. Victory didn't come without ghosts. Marcus caught me lingering in the glass lobby one evening, watching Porter employees file out with cardboard boxes. Some were being replaced, others reassigned. Legacies were being erased in real time. Second thoughts, he asked. I shook my head slowly. No, just remembering. Remembering all the times I sat at family dinners, invisible in plain sight. Remembering the sting of being told I was wasting my potential. Remembering how easy it had been for them to assume I was nothing. Now those memories stood in stark contrast to the Forbes cover, framed on my office wall, The Silent Revolution. My face above the headline, their legacy reduced to a footnote in my story. But the strangest shift wasn't the merger, it was my family. My mother, once so concerned with appearances, now sent me texts full of forced pride. Darling, the country club is simply buzzing about you. They want me to chair the charity gala. Isn't that marvelous? I didn't reply. My father, stripped of real power, carried the new title of Chairman Emeritus, a gilded cage with no influence. He avoided my gaze when we crossed paths. Pride still chained him, though it no longer protected him. And Victoria was the most transformed of all. At first, she resisted. She raged, threatened, whispered to allies on the board who no longer listened. She stormed into my office twice, demanding her CFO title back, insisting she'd been robbed. The first time I dismissed her with a simple earn it. The second with silence. By the third week, something shifted. She appeared at my office unannounced, but this time not in designer heels or flashing status symbols. She wore a simple blazer, no jewelry except a watch. Her expression was quieter. I've been reviewing the AI platform documentation, she said without preamble. It's brilliant. I didn't respond, just gestured for her to continue. I never understood what you were trying to say back then. All those years you tried to explain, I thought... She faltered, her lips pressing into a thin line. I thought you were jealous of me, that you resented me for being Dad's favorite. I leaned back in my chair, and now, she swallowed. Now I realize I wasted years trying to be him, copying his arrogance, his hunger, his tunnel vision. I don't even know who I am without it. Her honesty caught me off guard. This wasn't the Victoria I'd grown up with, the one who smirked, belittled, dismissed. This was someone stripped bare by failure. I can offer you something, I said finally. The junior analyst role. The real one, not the fabricated position they dangled at me. A chance to start over, not as Dad's shadow, not as the family's star, but as yourself. She looked at me, eyes glistening faintly. And you'd trust me, after everything. Trust is earned, I said. Just like success. Are you ready to earn both? Silence stretched between us. Then slowly she nodded. Yes. I extended my hand. Then welcome to Genesis. Leave your assumptions at the door. For the first time in years, she took my hand without squeezing too tightly, without trying to win. Just a handshake. Just acceptance. When she left, Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're giving her another chance. I glanced at the Forbes cover on the wall, then back at the door she had walked through. Sometimes the best punishment isn't exile. It's making them rebuild from the bottom the way they once made me. Marcus considered that, then nodded. Cruel, but fair. Not cruel, I corrected softly. Necessary. That night I stayed in the office long after the city lights flickered on. Victoria's words echoed in my mind. I had won, yes. But maybe, just maybe, there was still space for something more than revenge. Because power without legacy is fleeting. And perhaps my true legacy wasn't in destroying my family, it was in forcing them to grow just as I had. 6 months later. Genesis wasn't just a company anymore, it was the beating heart of an industry. Our AI platform had restructured entire banks, reshaped lending, and forced old financial titans to crawl into the present. Headlines no longer asked who Beverly Porter was. They only asked what she would do next. Yet in the quiet moments, I still thought about that chandelier in my parents' dining room, the one that cast judgment like holy light. Strange how memory lingers even when you've rewritten the ending. On my office wall hung the Forbes cover, The Silent Revolution. Beneath it, I'd framed the simple white shirt from that last family dinner. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. To me, it was a relic proof that armor doesn't always need to sparkle, it only needs to endure. Grandpa visited often. He'd grown frailer, but his mind was still sharp as a scalpel. One morning, he arrived carrying the old leather briefcase I remembered from childhood. "I thought you should have these," he said, laying out faded sheets across my desk. "Your first market model, age 12, the one that predicted the 2008 crash. Your college AI notes. They laughed at you. Then remember." I traced the familiar handwriting, my own younger and eager, desperate for someone to notice. "You kept all this?" He smiled, eyes twinkling. "Of course. I knew one day you'd need reminding that brilliance doesn't come from applause, it comes from persistence." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Does Dad know you saved these?" "He never asked," Grandpa said simply. Too busy grooming Victoria to be his reflection. As if summoned, my intercom buzzed. "Miss Porter, your sister is here." Victoria entered carrying no designer bag, no arrogance, just a slim folder and a quiet determination. She'd been working under me for months now, not glamorous work, not high-paying, but real. She was learning systems numbers, the grind of analysis. "I've completed the Q3 projections," she said, placing the folder on my desk. "And I think I've spotted an inefficiency in the AI's predictive model. With your permission, I'd like to run a test on an adjustment." I studied her. Not the words, those were technical competent, but her eyes. No trace of mockery, no lingering pride, just focus, hunger. "You've been working late," I said. "I've noticed." She nodded. "I want to earn this, really earn it." For the first time, I felt something unexpected respect. "Do it," I said. "Bring me the results by Monday." A flicker of a smile touched her lips. "Thank you." After she left, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "She's changing." "Yes," I said quietly, "or maybe she's finally starting." That evening, alone in my office, I looked out over the city I now ruled. Skyscrapers glittered like circuitry, every light a reminder of the systems I'd woven, the empire I'd built, while they weren't looking. My phone buzzed, another invitation to speak at an international summit. The topic, the power of being underestimated. I smiled. The irony wasn't lost on me. Because once I had been invisible at my own family's table. The quiet one, the overlooked one, the afterthought. But silence is not weakness. It is observation. It is patience. It is the seed of revolution. And as I stood in my office, framed by the city that was now mine, I realized something. This was never just about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. The quiet one had spoken, and the world was still listening.